Violet Jessup and the Ocean of Survival Sleeping History. Violet's early life and the ocean beckons. Crescent moon, a quiet beginning. Tonight, let us begin at the very start. Before the ocean claimed her destiny, before the names Titanic and Britannic were etched into her memory, there was simply a little girl. Her name, Violet Constance Jessup. She was born in October of 1887, in the distant lands of Argentina. The pampas stretched wide around her, flat and open, where winds whispered through tall grasses and clouds drifted endlessly across the blue. Her parents were Irish immigrants, simple people who had crossed an ocean of their own to find new life on another continent. Life in Argentina was harsh. The summers were blazing, the winters sharp with cold. The soil was stubborn, the harvest uncertain. And yet, within the small Jessup household, there was warmth. 9 children filling the rooms with cries, laughter, and endless motion. Violet was the first daughter, and from the beginning, her life was tested. As a child, she fell terribly ill with tuberculosis. The sickness was so grave that doctors whispered she would not live long. Her mother prayed, her father despaired. But Violet, even as a child, held on. Against the odds, she survived. That was the first time death brushed close against her cheek. And it would not be the last. Candle childhood shadows. Her father, William, was a hard-working man. He longed for his children to thrive in this new land. But fate was unkind. When Violet was still young, her father grew gravely ill and passed away. The home was never the same after. Her mother, left with so many mouths to feed, shouldered the impossible burden. To keep her children alive, she found work at sea as stewardess aboard passenger ships. It was work demanding patience, quiet endurance, and the ability to serve with a smile, no matter how heavy the heart. Violet watched her mother closely. She learned that survival was not grand or loud, but quiet, steady, and determined. Years later, when her mother too fell sick, Violet knew she must take her place. She would follow her onto the ocean. The sea, which had once separated her family from their Irish homeland, would now become Violet's workplace, her destiny, and her endless companion. Violet steps aboard her first ships. Water wave, a world of salt and wood. Violet's first voyages were not aboard glamorous ocean liners. They were smaller vessels, crossing shorter distances, where the work was heavy and the rewards few. Her days were filled with the rhythm of service, folding linens, cleaning cabins, assisting seasick passengers. The rocking of the waves beneath her feet became as familiar as the beating of her heart. She learned how to balance trays in stormy seas, how to walk silently down narrow halls while the ship creaked and groaned. The sea was not always kind. There were nights when storms raged, when waves slammed against the hull with thunderous force. Violet would hear passengers crying in fear, while she herself stayed calm, whispering words of comfort. She was still only a young woman, but the ocean was already shaping her. Anchor a calling, not just work. For most, the life of a stewardess was exhausting. Long hours. Endless demands. Sleepless nights tending to passengers. Yet Violet found a strange rhythm in it. The sound of waves outside the portholes. The way moonlight painted silver trails across the water. The smell of salt carried by the wind. It was not luxury that drew her to the sea, but a sense of belonging. Though she served others, the ocean served her as well. It gave her a place, a purpose, and eventually, a story that would echo for centuries. The RMS Olympic. Castle, a floating palace. By her mid-twenties, Violet's experience earned her a place on one of the grandest ships of the age, the RMS Olympic. Built by the White Star Line, the Olympic was a marvel of its time, stretching nearly 900 feet in length. Passengers gasped at her sweeping staircases, elegant dining halls, and cabins adorned like those of fine hotels. To Violet, she was both workplace and wonder. For the first time, she walked halls where glittering chandeliers swung gently with the ocean's sway. She carried trays past gentlemen in tailored suits and ladies in sparkling gowns. She served meals while a band played softly in the background, the music mixing with the ship's steady hum. Tornado trouble at sea. The Olympic's voyages were not without incident. In 1911, during one of her crossings, she collided with another vessel, HMS Hawk, in the waters near the Isle of Wight. The crash sent shudders through the decks, startling crew and passengers alike. The ship did not sink. Her strong design kept her afloat, but the event was unsettling. To Violet, it was a reminder that even the strongest vessels were fragile before the might of the sea. The whispers among crew and passengers were clear: if this could happen to the Olympic, what of her sister ship, the Titanic, soon to launch Crescent Moon preparing Violet? Yet Violet carried on. Each voyage taught her more: how to stay calm in chaos, how to move quickly in emergencies, how to reassure panicked passengers. She did not know it then, but every tray she carried, every storm she endured, every close call she survived, was preparing her for a night in April 1912, when history itself would tremble upon the waves. The Titanic disaster. Crescent Moon, April 1912, a dream voyage. The world called her unsinkable. The RMS Titanic, sister to the Olympic, was the grandest creation mankind had yet sent to sea. She was not merely a ship, she was a floating city, a palace of steel and light. And for Violet Jessup, she was the next step in her life at sea. When Violet first walked aboard Titanic, she felt the weight of the moment. The ship stretched endlessly, her white hull gleaming in the sunlight. Four mighty funnels rose into the sky, symbols of power and progress. Crew hurried about, passengers marveled, and the air was thick with excitement. Violet was assigned as a stewardess, tending to first-class passengers. These were the wealthiest travelers in the world: bankers, nobles, industrialists, families seeking comfort and luxury. Her job was to serve them tea, prepare their cabins, and ensure their every need was met. The voyage promised to be smooth. Calm seas, mild weather, and the confidence of modern engineering gave passengers reason to relax. Violet herself felt at ease. She had sailed through storms, collisions, and fears before. This, she thought, would be another ordinary crossing. How wrong she was. Milky Way life aboard Titanic. The days aboard Titanic were filled with routine and splendor. Violet moved quietly among passengers, carrying trays, adjusting pillows, folding linens. She heard laughter spill from the dining saloons, where crystal glasses clinked and violins played sweetly. She saw children running along polished decks, their faces bright with wonder. She watched ladies in gowns stroll beneath the stars, while men smoked cigars and spoke of business, politics, and the future. Titanic was alive with confidence. There was talk that she was invincible, that nothing could bring her down. Some called her a triumph over nature itself. Violet listened quietly, though she had seen enough of the sea to know, the ocean bows to no one. Nights were especially beautiful. Violet would sometimes pause at a porthole, gazing out at the Atlantic stretching endlessly into blackness. The stars shone brighter at sea than on land, reflected in the dark waves. The engines rumbled softly beneath her feet, steady and reassuring. To the passengers, Titanic was peace. To Violet, she was duty. And then came April 14th snowflake, the night of the iceberg. The evening began like any other. Dinner was served. The band played. Passengers retired to lounges, smoking rooms, and cabins. The air outside was cold, sharper than usual, but calm. The sea was eerily still, so still that some remarked it was like gliding over glass. Violet finished her duties and returned to her quarters. She spoke softly with other stewardesses, folded her apron, and prepared for rest. The night was quiet. Too quiet. At 11:40 p.m., the stillness shattered. A jolt ran through the ship, not violent, but enough to make glasses tremble, enough to stir the sleepers. The engines hummed differently, the vibrations beneath the floor changing pitch. Passengers looked up from their beds. Crew stiffened. Something had happened. Violet felt it too. She later recalled that the sensation was not of a crash, but a strange, gentle bump. A scrape. The ship shivered, then steadied. Silence followed. For a moment, it seemed unimportant. For a moment, all was calm again. But deep below, water was already rushing in. Anchor, confusion and calm. The next hour unfolded in a haze of confusion. Orders passed from officer to officer. Passengers, curious but unconcerned, stepped onto the decks in coats and shawls, laughing about the chill night air. Crew members reassured them. There was no danger, they said. Titanic was safe. Titanic could not sink. Violet moved among the passengers, following instructions. She helped calm anxious travelers, guided women and children toward the upper decks, and carried blankets. The cold bit sharply against her skin. The stars above glittered with icy clarity, while the sea lay black and endless below. Gradually, the truth became impossible to ignore. The tilt of the ship. The list of the decks. The quiet urgency in the crew's voices. Titanic was wounded. And though many denied it, some instinct stirred in Violet's heart. This was not a drill. This was real. Ship the lifeboats lower. The lifeboats were uncovered. Few believed they were needed. Passengers resisted boarding, unwilling to leave the grand safety of Titanic for small, fragile boats. Violet herself was ordered to set an example. As a stewardess, she was told to step into one of the first lifeboats, to reassure the others. She hesitated. To leave Titanic unsinkable. Titanic felt absurd. But duty called. Quietly, she obeyed, lowering into the night on the creaking ropes of the lifeboat. Around her, women and children shivered, clutching each other against the cold. The dark sea yawned below, merciless and silent. From the lifeboat, Violet looked back at Titanic. The sight etched into her memory forever, the great ship, lights glowing, decks tilting, music still playing faintly. She seemed less a ship now, more a wounded giant, fighting against the inevitable pull of the sea. Water waved the sinking. Hours passed in slow agony. Violet watched as Titanic's bow sank deeper into the water, her stern rising higher. The cries of passengers filled the air, voices of fear, disbelief, and despair. Lifeboats drifted away, each a small island of fragile humanity in the vast Atlantic. Then came the end. The ship broke. A roar like thunder rolled across the sea as the stern rose high, silhouetted against the stars, before crashing down into the water. Titanic was gone. Silence followed, broken only by the cries of those left in the freezing water. Violet clutched the side of the lifeboat, her breath clouding in the icy air. She had survived. Again. But survival carried no joy that night. Only sorrow. Only the echo of 1,000 souls fading into the dark. Crescent moon dawn over the Atlantic. When morning came, the sea was calm once more. The sun rose slowly, casting pale gold over endless water. Debris floated gently, pieces of wood, fragments of belongings, reminders of a ship now resting beneath the waves. Rescue arrived. The RMS Carpathia pulled survivors aboard, one by one, their faces pale with shock, eyes hollow with grief. Violet stepped onto her new deck with trembling legs. She looked back at the horizon where Titanic had vanished. The ocean gave nothing away. It was as if the great ship had never existed at all. For Violet, the memory would never fade. Titanic was gone, but her story was only beginning. The Britannic disaster and other shipwrecks. Crescent Moon, the war years. After Titanic, Violet could have left the sea forever. Many would have. But for her, the ocean was both duty and destiny. She returned to service, for the world soon needed ships again, not for pleasure, but for war. It was 1914. The Great War swept across Europe, and even the grand liners were called into service. Among them was HMHS Britannic, sister to Titanic and Olympic. She was converted into a hospital ship, painted white with great red crosses upon her sides, lanterns glowing at night to signal mercy. For Violet, it was another voyage into uncertainty. This time, her role was to tend to the wounded soldiers broken by battle, men carried from trenches and fields to the care of doctors and nurses aboard the ship. The sea was no longer a place of luxury, but of suffering, healing, and fragile hope. Anchor aboard Britannic. Britannic was even larger than Titanic, built with improvements meant to avoid her sister's fate. Extra lifeboats. Reinforced bulkheads. A ship designed to survive. The White Star Line had learned from tragedy, or so it was believed. Violet walked the familiar corridors, though now the air was filled with the scent of antiseptic instead of perfume. The dining halls were gone, replaced by wards filled with beds. The music of violins was replaced by the quiet moans of the injured, the careful steps of nurses, the orders of doctors. Though the war raged, life aboard Britannic carried a strange calm. The sea offered a kind of separation from the chaos of the battlefield. Violet moved from bed to bed, adjusting bandages, offering water, speaking softly to comfort those who drifted between pain and fever. Once again, she had found her rhythm at sea. And once again, the ocean waited to test her. Water Wave, November 21, 1916. The morning was clear. The waters of the Aegean Sea shimmered in soft sunlight. Britannic sailed smoothly, her great hull cutting through waves with steady confidence. The crew moved about their duties, doctors checked patients, and Violet performed her rounds. Then, without warning, a thunderous explosion shook the ship. The deck lurched, the walls trembled, and cries of alarm rose at once. Britannic had struck a mine, planted by enemy forces beneath the water. Sea water rushed in. The ship shuddered with the wound, groaning as her forward compartments filled. Panic spread like fire. Men shouted, whistles blew, orders clashed with fear. Britannic, the strongest of the sisters, was dying. Violet's heart pounded, but she moved quickly. She helped guide patients and crew toward the lifeboats, her calm voice steady against the chaos. But this time, escape would not be simple. Ship the desperate launch. Lifeboats were lowered in haste. Some dropped into the water unevenly, spilling men into the sea. Others drifted dangerously close to the ship's still turning propellers. Violet, forced into one of these lifeboats, felt the terrifying pull as water churned with deadly force. She later recalled the moment vividly, the lifeboat, sucked toward the giant blades, the roar of water deafening, death only feet away. At the last instant, she leapt into the sea. Cold water closed over her, rushing past as the propellers devoured the lifeboat she had just left. She struck the water hard, her head colliding with something solid. Darkness flashed before her eyes. But she fought upward, gasping for air, and swam desperately away. Others were not so fortunate. Milky Way Britannic's end. Within just 55 minutes, the Great Britannic was gone. The largest ship lost during the Great War. She rolled and slipped beneath the waves, her white hull vanishing into the deep. Over 1,000 souls survived, though 30 were lost in the chaos. Violet lived again. But not without scars. She suffered a head injury from her desperate escape, one that would trouble her for the rest of her life. Yet still, she endured. Still, she returned to shore. Still, she carried on. 3 great disasters: Olympic's collision, Titanic's sinking, Britannic's destruction. Violet had faced them all. And survived them all. Other shipwreck stories: Whispers of the Sea. Violet's story was not alone. The ocean holds countless tragedies, each a reminder of how fragile human ambition can be against the deep. Candle, the Lusitania, 1915. A grand passenger liner, torpedoed by a German U-boat off the coast of Ireland. Nearly 1,200 lives lost in just 18 minutes. Families torn apart, the world shocked by the brutality of war at sea. Survivors spoke of the sudden chaos, the explosion, the tilt, the scramble for lifeboats. The Lusitania was gone before many even understood what had happened. Candle, the Essex, 1820. A whaling ship struck not by iceberg or mine, but by a whale itself. The creature rammed her with terrifying force, leaving her crew stranded thousands of miles from land. Their survival story, adrift on small boats, starving, desperate, would inspire Herman Melville's Moby Dick. The sea, in this tale, was both predator and prison. Candle, the Mary Celeste, 1872. Perhaps the strangest tale of all. A ship found adrift in the Atlantic, sails set, cargo untouched, meals half-eaten, but not a soul aboard. To this day, her crew's fate remains a mystery. Some say pirates, others mutiny, others whispers of the supernatural. But the truth is lost, as silent as the waves that carried her. Candle, the Dona Paz, 1987. In the modern age, too, the ocean claimed lives. A ferry in the Philippines, colliding with an oil tanker, erupted into flames. More than 4,000 lives lost, the deadliest peacetime maritime disaster in history. A reminder that even in our time of machines and technology, the sea remains merciless. Crescent Moon, the weight of stories. As Violet listened to such tales, as she lived her own, one truth became clear: the sea remembers. Every shipwreck is a whisper in its depths. Every life lost is a ripple across eternity. And those who survive, like Violet, carry the stories within them, forever. Forgotten shipwrecks, ocean imagery and closing reflections. Crescent moon: forgotten tragedies of the sea. The sea does not forget. Even when the world moves on, the waves still carry whispers of forgotten tragedies. Violet's story of survival belongs to a greater ocean of memory, where countless ships and souls have been claimed. Anchor: the Andrea Doria, 1956. On a foggy night off the coast of Nantucket, two great ships, the Italian liner Andrea Doria and the Swedish vessel Stockholm, collided in the dark. Metal tore like paper, water poured in, and within hours, Andrea Doria was gone. Hundreds perished, though many were rescued in daring lifeboat operations. For those who survived, the memory of groaning steel, tilting decks, and the cries of passengers haunted their dreams for life. Anchor: the Wilhelm Gustloff, 1945. Perhaps the most devastating of all. In the frozen Baltic Sea, thousands of refugees fled the advancing Soviet army aboard the Wilhelm Gustloff. Over 10,000 souls packed her decks, families huddling together for warmth. Then came the torpedoes. Within minutes, chaos consumed the ship. Darkness. Freezing water. The cries of children. Nearly 9,000 lives were lost, the deadliest shipwreck in history. Yet outside of whispered histories, few remember her. Anchor: the Texing, 1822. Known as the Titanic of the East, Texing was a Chinese junk carrying over 1,600 people when she struck a reef in the South China Sea. She sank swiftly, dragging nearly all aboard into the depths. For over a century, she lay hidden, her story nearly erased, until divers discovered her remains. Among the wreckage, porcelain, artifacts, and echoes of lives lost. Anchor: the SS Arctic, 1854. Once hailed as one of the finest ships of the Collins Line, the Arctic met her end in the cold waters off Newfoundland after colliding with another vessel. Lifeboats were launched, but in cruel fashion, many crew and men took places meant for women and children. Over 300 perished, including every woman and child aboard. The story shocked the world, and yet, over time, it too drifted into silence. Water waved the ocean as a mirror. Each of these tragedies, each of Violet's own, tells us something about the sea. The ocean is vast, indifferent, eternal. To some it gives passage, fortune, and peace. To others, it gives fear, loss, and sorrow. But always, it reminds us, life is fragile. We build ships of steel, but even they can break. We dream of safety, but even the calmest night can hold danger. And yet within the waves, there is also beauty. Imagine the ocean at night. The stars mirrored upon its surface, shimmering as if the sky itself has doubled. The sound of waves soft, steady, like the beating of a giant heart. The salty wind, cool against the skin. For those who dare to listen, the sea is both lullaby and lesson. Crescent Moon, a survivor's quiet life. After Britannic, Violet's life slowed. She returned to work at sea for many years, though no disaster ever again touched her so closely. She lived quietly, carrying her memories, speaking of them only sparingly. To some, she told the tale of leaping from Britannic into the sea. To others, she admitted her haunting memories of Titanic's final music. But mostly, she lived in silence. She passed away in 1971, at the age of 83. The sea had not claimed her, though it tried again and again. Her story, like the waves, rolled on beyond her time. Candle closing reflections for the listener. And now, our journey together drifts toward its end. We have sailed beside Violet Jessup, from her childhood in Argentina to her work upon the grandest ships of her age. We have stood with her on the decks of the Titanic, heard the groan of Britannic as she sank, and felt the cold spray of the sea upon our faces. We have listened to the echoes of other ships, other tragedies, forgotten by many, remembered by the waves. What do these stories tell us? That life is uncertain. That survival is both gift and burden. That even the strongest ships can fall, but those who endure can carry their light through the darkest nights. And now, as you listen, as your breath slows, let these stories become waves themselves. Rising, falling, steady and calm. Imagine yourself upon a quiet ship. No storm, no danger. Only the hush of water against the hull. The stars above, endless and bright. The air cool and gentle. You are safe. Safe to rest. Safe to drift. Safe to dream. Let the memory of Violet fade, like a ship passing over the horizon. Let the voices of the ocean grow softer, until they are only whispers. And as your eyes grow heavy, let yourself sink not into water, but into sleep. Deep, calm, endless sleep. Been accused of a crime. Not just any crime, but a crime against humans. The villagers whisper, the priest prays, and the bailiff prepares the parchment. Soon, this pig will stand trial in a court of law, before judge and jury, as if it were a person. This is not a dream. This is history. Welcome to the strange and fascinating world of medieval animal trials. Balance scale: the medieval court system. In the Middle Ages, justice was often a blend of faith, superstition, and ritual. Courts were not only for men and women, they could also be for animals. Yes, animals. Pigs, cows, horses, dogs, and even insects were summoned, charged, and sometimes sentenced. Why? Because in the medieval mind, animals lived alongside humans not only in the fields and homes, but also in the moral universe. If a pig killed a child, it was not seen simply as nature's accident. it was seen as murder. And murder demanded justice. Thus, the courtroom became a theater, a stage where humans and animals shared the strange performance of law. Pig. The case of the pig. The most common defendant in these trials was the humble pig. In many villages, pigs roamed freely, eating scraps, living close to humans. And sometimes, tragedy struck. A pig, startled or hungry, might bite or trample a child. Such acts shocked the community. And so, the pig would be seized, placed in custody, and put on trial. Records tell us of pigs dressed in human clothes, led into courtrooms, and made to stand before judges. Witnesses were called. Testimonies given. And in some cases, punishments declared. The pig could be hanged, burned, or even buried alive, punishments that mirrored human law. As strange as it sounds, these acts were not seen as cruelty then. They were seen as necessary order, as justice being fulfilled. Candle. The ceremony of trial. Picture this. The town square fills with people. The judge, robed in black, sits upon a raised platform. A clerk reads aloud the charges. The pig stands nearby, tied or held by ropes. Sometimes, to emphasize the seriousness, the pig is dressed in a jacket or hat, mocked as if it were a wayward villager. The priest prays. The villagers murmur. The pig squeals, not knowing why it is there. And then, the judgment comes. The sentence is pronounced. The pig's fate is sealed. These trials were slow, deliberate, and highly ritualistic. They were not simply about the pig. They were about reassuring the community that justice, divine and earthly, had been done. Milky Way Slow Reflections. As you hear these stories, let your mind drift. The medieval world was not like ours. It was slower, heavier with belief, filled with rituals that may seem strange to us. But in their strangeness, there is a kind of rhythm, a rhythm of order and meaning. So as the courtroom fades, imagine the echo of the church bell once more. The crowd disperses. The pig is gone. And the night settles over the village, calm and quiet. Rest with this image. For this is only the beginning of our long journey through the forgotten trials of animals. Famous bizarre trials. Mouseface. The trial of rats. One of the most curious stories comes from 15th century France. A group of rats was accused of destroying barley crops. Yes, not one rat, but an entire colony. The court summoned them, and when the rats did not appear, a lawyer was appointed to defend them. This lawyer, clever and bold, argued that the rats could not safely attend because the roads were full of cats. How could they possibly appear, when danger lurked at every turn? The judge listened, the villagers laughed, and in the end, the trial stretched on, long and fruitless. Imagine the scene: a solemn courtroom, a clerk writing notes, and all of it for rats. The absurdity of it is almost comical to us, but to the people of that time, it was part of the rhythm of justice. Even rats were bound by the law. Dog faced dogs before the judge. Dogs, too, sometimes stood accused. A biting dog might be brought before a magistrate. Records tell us of cases where dogs were punished publicly, to warn others, or rather, to warn their owners. But there were also times when dogs were shown mercy, defended by owners who swore their loyalty and good character. In some tales, dogs were even honored for loyalty, standing beside their masters in danger, or refusing to leave their side. The medieval court could condemn, but it could also acknowledge the bond between man and beast. Horse-face horses on trial. Horses were vital in medieval life for farming, for war, for travel. Yet even these noble creatures sometimes stood trial. A horse that kicked and killed a man might be seen not just as dangerous, but as guilty. And so, with solemn ritual, the court would treat the horse as if it had chosen violence. Imagine a great horse, tall and restless, standing in a wooden pen near the courtroom. The villagers gathered, whispering. Some believed the horse was cursed. Others pitied it. The judge pronounced sentence, and the horse's fate was sealed. In this, we see the strange blend of superstition and order that guided medieval minds. Honeybee insects and excommunication. Perhaps the strangest trials were those of insects. Locusts, beetles, and even weevils were summoned by the church when they destroyed crops. Priests would issue warnings, and when the insects did not leave, they might be excommunicated, cast out from the holy order of creation. Picture it, a tiny beetle, unaware of the priest's words, continuing to nibble at leaves while Latin chants echoed across the fields. The ceremony gave people comfort, a sense of control against forces of nature they could not otherwise fight. Milky Way reflections in the candlelight. These trials may sound amusing, even absurd. But in their ritual, they offered people a sense of balance. The world was uncertain, crops could fail, animals could turn violent, nature could seem cruel. By putting even animals and insects under the rule of law, medieval people believed they were keeping chaos at bay. As you drift now, imagine a quiet hall, lit only by flickering candles. The parchment lies open, the ink drying. Outside, the night is deep and still. The lawyer's voice fades, the judge's gavel rests. The rats, the dogs, the horses, the insects all pass into silence. The courtroom sleeps, and so can you. Symbolism, religion and society. Latin cross, faith and the law of creation. To truly understand why animals were tried, we must step into the medieval mind, a world shaped by faith. People believed the universe was ordered by God. Everything had its place: kings and peasants, priests and villagers, animals and crops. When an animal committed harm, it was not just an accident. It was seen as a disruption of divine order. And so, the court was more than a human institution. It was a mirror of heaven's justice. By bringing an animal to trial, people believed they were restoring balance not only in society, but in the grand design of creation. Scroll symbolism of the trials. Each trial carried layers of meaning. A pig dressed in clothes was not only mocked, it symbolized the blurring of lines between man and beast. A rat trial was not only about crops, it was about human struggle against the unseen forces of destruction. Even the excommunication of insects carried weight, as if humanity could speak directly to nature and demand obedience. In a sense, these trials were rituals of storytelling. They turned chaos into narrative, and narrative into comfort. Castle, the role of the community. The trials were public spectacles. Villagers gathered in squares to watch animals judged. These gatherings bound the community together. They whispered, they laughed, they prayed. The fear of animals dangerous, destructive, or simply wild became something shared, something spoken aloud and dealt with as one. When the sentence was carried out, it was not only punishment. It was reassurance. The people left believing order had been restored. Life could go on. The fields would grow. Children could play. The world, once more, was safe. Crown power and authority. There was another layer to these strange trials, power. By extending the reach of law to animals, rulers and priests showed that nothing lay beyond their control. Justice reached the farmyard, the stable, even the field. The spectacle reminded people that authority was vast, and that no creature escaped its gaze. The sight of a pig executed or an insect cursed carried an unspoken message: human order ruled all, from man to beast. Crescent moon reflections beneath the moon. Now, picture the quiet aftermath of such trials. The villagers gone, the square empty, the moonlight falling softly on the stones. The echoes of the judge's voice linger in the air, but fade into silence. The animals, once accused, are gone, but their memory remains, shaping how the people think, how they pray, how they dream. As you listen, let these reflections settle like soft dust on old parchment. These trials, strange as they seem, were part of the great tapestry of belief, woven with threads of fear, ritual, and hope. The candles burn low. The court grows dark. And the night deepens. Forgotten cases and closing reflections. Books, forgotten trials of the Middle Ages. Many animal trials have been lost to time, written only in faint ink upon crumbling parchment. But a few fragments survive, enough to remind us of how vast and peculiar this tradition was. In Switzerland, a group of caterpillars was once summoned to court. The villagers accused them of eating their vineyards bare. The insects, of course, did not appear. And so, the court pronounced a sentence: the caterpillars were ordered to leave within 6 days, or face excommunication. In Italy, a donkey was brought before a magistrate for alleged misconduct. Yet instead of condemnation, the donkey was declared innocent, defended by neighbors who swore to its gentle nature. Here, Mercy prevailed. In France, field mice were prosecuted for destroying grain. Lawyers argued cleverly, insisting that the mice could not all be summoned at once, since they lived scattered in burrows far away. The court considered the plea with seriousness, as though it were hearing noblemen speak. Each of these cases, half comic and half tragic, reminds us that medieval people did not see animals only as beasts. They saw them as part of their moral universe. Sheaf of rice, nature and control. Behind these trials lies something deeper, the human struggle against nature. The Middle Ages were full of uncertainty. Crops failed, plagues spread, storms destroyed homes. By placing animals under trial, people felt they were pushing back against the chaos of the natural world. It was a way to say, we are not powerless. We can speak. We can command. Even the smallest creature must listen to us. Of course, the animals did not listen. The caterpillars still ate the vines. The mice still scattered in the fields. But the ritual gave people comfort. And comfort, in uncertain times, was as precious as bread. Candle ritual as story. Think of these trials as stories acted out in real life. They were plays of justice, performed for villagers who longed for meaning. The court became a stage. The judge became narrator. The animals became characters in a drama of order versus disorder. And when the curtain fell, when the sentence was spoken, the punishment given, the people went home feeling the story had reached its end. The world made sense again, if only for a little while. Milky Way, the long night. Now, let us turn from the trials themselves, and reflect. Imagine the flickering light of a torch, casting shadows against the stone walls of a medieval hall. The trial is over. The parchment is rolled up, sealed with wax. The judge departs, robes sweeping the floor. The villagers go back to their cottages. Silence falls. Outside, the sky is wide and dark. Stars glimmer, as they have for centuries. A cold wind rustles the thatched roofs. And somewhere, in the barns and fields, the very animals once judged now sleep peacefully, unaware of laws or punishments, living only in the rhythm of nature. Crescent moon, a gentle meditation. As you listen, let your breath slow. The stories of pigs and rats, of dogs and horses, of insects and donkeys, they drift like distant bells, fading into memory. They belong to another age, another way of seeing the world. All that remains now is quiet. The courtroom has vanished. The fields lie still. The night is soft, and endless. Imagine yourself walking away from the village square, the cobblestones cool beneath your feet. The air smells of hay and wood smoke. The church bell no longer rings. Only the sound of crickets remains. You reach the edge of the fields, and there, you pause. Above you, the stars stretch forever. You breathe in. You breathe out. Slowly, calmly, deeply. The medieval world fades like mist. The animals are free, the trials forgotten. And you are free to let go, free to rest. Dove closing words. And so, our long journey ends. From the absurdity of pigs in human clothes, to the solemnity of insects excommunicated, we have walked through a forgotten chapter of history. Strange, yes. But in its strangeness, full of lessons about fear, belief, and the need for meaning. Now, let those lessons fall away. Let the weight of history drift. All that remains is stillness. The candle burns low. The hall grows dark. The world sleeps. And so may you. Close your eyes. Let the rhythm of your breath be the only sound. Feel the calm wash over you, like waves upon a silent shore. The story is finished. The night is yours. Sleep, deeply and peacefully.